are these people?
There we go. All right. So our next story tonight, you probably didn't know this because this got no traction at all whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't.
But
no idea.
Yeah. So over the weekend, a bill passed to ensure that Congress can keep their lights on, essentially. So the fact that that wasn't really talked about much was kind of disappointing. But shout out to friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice, who tweeted this ad nauseum over the weekend. And that kind of inspired me to do this story. So, and kind of in a lot of what he kind of shared on Instagram. So if you don't follow him on Instagram, by the way, you guys should. But so, as I said, Congress averted a government shutdown with a passing of a massive $1.2 trillion bill spending package.
1.2.
That would avert
like $1 trillion.
Yes.
That's a lot more than $1 billion. I'm just saying.
That's right.
That's a lot. That's way more.
Even Dr. Evil wasn't thinking in.
No, not in $1 trillion. Okay.
Right. So, but but I think you need to know what was in the bill.
Yes.
We're not going to go through all of it. We'll give a general outline of what was in the bill and go into specifics of some of it, more of the fuck shit. And one in particular, especially in relation to Palestine, that I think got a little bit more attention over the weekend, which makes sense. So this is actually from a new, to me, publication, News from the States, written by these 4 people here. I'm not going to name them.
Okay.
You can read, those of you who are seeing visual. But they report, in regards to the spending bill, Congress released the final 6 government funding bills early Thursday, starting off a sprint towards the Friday midnight deadline to wrap up work that was supposed to be finished nearly 6 months ago. The bipartisan agreement on the $1.2 trillion spending package, which emerged just before 3 a.m., came less than 2 weeks after the U.S. House and Senate approved the other 6 annual appropriations bills. This package includes the spending measures for some of the most crucial functions of the federal government: the Departments of Defense, Education, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Labor, State, and Treasury. The bill would also fund Congress, the Executive Office of the President, the Judiciary, and the Social Security Administration. So, so basically the main departments.
Yeah. Everyone's paychecks, everyone's everything.
Yeah. So basically, to ensure that our government is able to run. So, for those, just keep it in layman's terms. The 1,012-page spending package provides money for hundreds of programs, including many that lawmakers will tout on the campaign trail heading towards the November elections. Included, can you zoom in, please? U.S. troops and civilian Defense Department employees will receive a 5.2 pay raise retroactive to 1st of January 2024. The FBI's new headquarters project, which has not only divided Democrats and Republicans, but the congressional delegations from Virginia and Maryland, will receive $200 million for construction on the Greenbelt, Maryland site via the General Service Administration. So, money for a new building for the FBI.
Oh,
states will get
okay, because they needed one.
Right. States will get $55 million in new election security grant funding, probably in relation to voting for this year.
Yep.
Customs and Border Protection, as well as Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, will get more than $4 billion in funding increases. Scroll down, please.
Yep.
Childcare and early learning programs at the Department of Health and Human Services will receive a $1 billion increase in funding. The boost will go towards the Child Care and Developmental Block Grant, which provides grants to state, territorial, and tribal agencies, and Head Start, which provides funding to local grantees. That's probably one of the only decent things in here.
Sure.
The U.S. Capitol Police will receive a 7.8 funding increase.
Of course.
Keep that in, hold that.
Yeah.
There's more to that. Afghans who assisted the United States during the war would be eligible for an additional 12,000 special immigrants visas. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, the primary aid organization in Gaza, will be stripped of U.S. funding after Israel accused agency employees of taking part in the October 7th attacks.
What fucking dickheads. Okay.
Right. So that's the general outline. And for time, we're not going to go through every single bit of it. We're just going to talk about the fuckery in some of these. And again, if you want to read the whole article, the article is in the description.
So we get, just to summarize, we get new Spook City, new FBI city. We get no more funding to UNRWA. So screw that Gazan aid.
More money for police.
More money for Capitol Police. Yep.
Right?
Okay. Doing real well. And one crumb.
Those are the main ones.
Like one crumb for the children that George Carlin would tell you is one of the three things that politicians hide behind is the keys. So, yes. Okay. Continue to defense. Let's 812. Oh, Jesus Christ. Read that. Go ahead.
Congress plans to spend $824.5 billion on the defense spending bill, which predominantly funds the Pentagon, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
That's your almost $1 trillion right there. That's the majority right there is that.
Yeah.
So $824.5 billion, a billion with a B, 800 of that. Like, think about what a million is. Like, what could you do with $1 million, Care Bear, in your very own city of DC? Like, right.
Well,
okay, now.
Well, for me, quite a bit. For the city, not that much.
Okay, now times that by 800.
Right.
Right. Like, that's only one. Right. That's only getting close to $1 billion.
Right.
Like, you have to multiply that by like 1,000 to get a million or to get a billion. And then we're almost at 1 trillion. So we're at 800 of the 800 of those billions. So times that million by 100, right? Something like that. Math, you know.
Well, as the saying goes, where you spend your money is what you value. So obviously, as you said, a huge majority of this spending bill is towards this.
Yeah.
But anyway, that bill includes funding for a 5.2 pay raise for military and civilian defense employees that will be retroactive to January 1st, 2024. The basic allowance for housing will increase by 5.4%. And the basic allowance for sustenance will increase by 1.7%. That total spending level will be divvied up among several core programs, including $156.2 billion for military personnel,
76.
An increase of an increase of $3.5 billion, $287.2 billion for operations and maintenance, $9.1 billion above current levels, $172 billion for procurement of military equipment, $9.8 billion more than the enacted level, and $148.3 billion for research and development, an $8.6 billion increase, according to a House GOP summary and a summary from House Democrats.
Okay. Well,
the Israeli cooperative missile defense programs would get $300 million for research and testing, as well as $200 million for procurement, including for the Iron Dome and David Sling. An additional $300 million will go towards the Ukraine Security and Assistance Initiative.
Okay.
Which will probably be the last bit of money Ukraine gets, probably.
I doubt it at this point. They can just put whatever they want over there, you know? So, like what? They've had one push. The Republicans have had one pushback on that, right? And they almost buckled. And then they were like, next one we'll hook you up again, you know? So, you know, like, I expect some more of that for sure, you know, without much pushback.
Right.
So, but.
Well, we'll see how it goes depending.
I hope. I would love if that was the last. Yeah. Be nice.
Senate Defense Appropriations Subcommittee Chair John Tesler, a Montana Democrat, said in a statement the bill will invest in our ability to stay ahead of the threat of China, defend our country from foreign adversaries while standing firm with American allies, and take care of our service members and their families.
China.
The joint... What was that?
China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The joint exploratory statement that accompanies the bills calls on the Department of Defense to look into why the military is having difficulty recruiting. The military services are in the midst of one of the greatest recruiting crises since the creation of the all-volunteer force, it says. Since retention of enlisted service members remains strong, those who continue to serve will promote to more senior grades, leaving a distressing shortfall in junior enlisted service members who account for 40% of the total active U.S. military force. The nation needs America's youth to strongly consider uninformed service.
Uniform service, but uninformed is equally as accurate. So, you know.
Right. Actually didn't realize that, but you're right. Like
yeah. Yes. Yeah. Uniformed.
The best kind of youth.
Yes. Yeah.
The package calls on the Defense Department to conduct an independent survey to better understand the failure of recruitment efforts by the services, according to House Republicans' summary of the bill. I mean, we could tell you that for free.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to spend money to understand why you are not interested in the military. The Secretary of Defense must also brief the Defense Appropriations Subcommittees on a proposal to increase the pay for junior enlisted troops.
Okay.
So Stephen Schmelner, never heard of him prior to this, but he tweeted, the highest court in the world instructs states to prevent genocide in Gaza, but Biden is doing everything he can to enable it. Yeah, another example, Biden is urging Congress to pass a spending bill with $3.8 billion in military aid for Israel. And then he continues here, and actually, I'm not going to read that, but one thing about this article was they didn't give all the information that they possibly could. So I added this insert, but this was also included in this spending package as well.
Okay.
In terms of making sure that Israel gets their monies.
Yeah.
So anyway, on to Homeland Security. Congress plans to spend $62 billion on the Department of Homeland Security, including upgrading technology to screen for narcotics like fentanyl at U.S. ports of entry, and an additional $495 million in funding to hire 22,000 Border Patrol agents.
Okay.
The bill provides U.S. Customs and Border Protection with $19 billion, a $3 billion increase above current levels, and more than $9.6 billion to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, an increase of $1.1 billion. So,
Collin,
what are you doing?
Collin, how much have we heard from the other side of the aisle on the fact that Biden is terrible on the fucking border, whatever? Granted, this isn't Biden, but I guarantee you Biden will take credit for all this, right? That, how much did they give? They've been fear-mongering you into this Border Patrol issue, right? So now what? They just allowed 19 billion of your taxpayer dollars
to fund ICE.
Not even ICE, which is a product of U.S. Like ICE alone got an increase of $1 billion. Like, I mean, we did give like 300 of that to Ukraine. So, you know, like it could be our borders, but we're dealing with other people's borders right now. Having said that, me and you have both covered how Biden has made it worse for immigrants coming in the country. So, you know, yeah, that's.
You see why I wanted to talk about this and kind of break this down?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's just
the shit, but to kind of see it and talk about the numbers, and then like, and it's especially given what happened in Baltimore, like the fuck shit with that.
These are the private positions,
right?
You see all the public positions of the stances they're trying to take. This is what all these members voted for.
And we're gonna get into that.
Yes. Who
did?
Who?
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 Thank you.
I was looking for it.
It puts in place policy requirements for detention centers, such as barring contracts with private companies that do not meet inspection standards, and providing an additional $3 million to expand the use of ICE body cameras, according to the explanatory statement.
That they'll just turn off whenever they want anyway.
Basically. The legislation will require the Department of Homeland Security to publish data on the 15th of every month on the total detention capacity and the number of gotaways and people turned back at the southern border, according to the joint explanatory statement. DHS refers to people as gotaways when an individual is observed making an unauthorized entry into the U.S. and is not turned away or apprehended. That data is not publicly available.
The sneaky fast ones. That's what they're saying there. Like,
the Office of the Secretary and Executive Management would get $404 million, an increase of about $20 million. About $30 million of that funding would go to support the safe reunification of families who are unjustly separated at the U.S.-Mexico border by the Trump administration.
What about the Biden ones?
Of the bill. Yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
just the Trump ones were helping.
Right.
You know. Okay.
The bill provides $5.1 billion for enforcement and removal operations, an increase of $900 million above current funding. Of that, $355 million will go towards 41,500 detention beds. The bill would appropriate $11.8 billion for the U.S. Coast Guard at $122.7 million boost, $10.6 billion for the Transportation Security Administration, an increase of $1.2 billion, and $25.3 billion for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, a funding cut of $72.9 million.
Oh, nice. Cut FEMA, because that's okay.
Right. So fuck it if you have a hurricane.
Yeah. Yeah, or any of those.
But we're going to make sure we're going to get those illegals.
Sean Miller in the chat helping my math. A trillion is a million times a million. Right?
Yes.
1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years.
Right.
Like, just to give these kind of numbers perspective. Like, you know. So, yeah. This is
the FEMA funding would go towards several projects with $20 billion of those funds for disaster relief.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Legislative plans.
Yep.
The legislative branch appropriations bill includes $6.75 billion for operations in the Capitol, including funding relating to the summer's party conventions and the presidential inauguration in January 2025. The bill would boost funding for the U.S. Capitol Police to $792 million, a 7.8% increase from fiscal 2023. The measure includes funding for retention and recruitment programs of Capitol Police officers, including student loan payments and tuition reimbursements. I yelled at you for this last night when I was prepping.
Sure.
God forbid that teachers get this shit.
Yeah.
But cops do. Or at least cops are more considered than a teacher to get this kind of stuff, this perks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Capitol Police officers, the force responsible for security at the Capitol complex, reported lower morale in the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Oh, so these poor babies felt demoralized because of what happened on January 6th, which they allowed in.
Yeah.
For real?
And
Damn,
they
it
get
must be
raised.
true.
What?
Like, fuck the Capitol Police.
792 million is you know, this is a chunk of change.
This is an essential investment in democracy and oversight that bolsters the legislative branch's capacity to better serve the public, said Senator Jack Reed, a Rhode Island Democrat who chairs the Legislative Branch Appropriations Subcommittee. This bill delivers the funding and infrastructure required for the U.S. Capitol Police to safeguard the Capitol complex and keep it accessible to the public. No, bitch. It's meant to protect you. Not us, you.
Yeah.
Because God forbid that more protests arise at the Capitol within the next few months. You want to make sure that your asses are protected. Anyway, a joint explanatory statement accompanying the bill says the measure would allow $2 million for Capitol Police to protect members of Congress outside the Capitol complex but within the Washington, D.C. region. Members have experienced increased threats in recent years. Oh, gee. So they don't like it when we say shit to them. So they need to be protected.
Yep.
Okay. The measure also includes funding for quadrennial events related to the presidential election.
Yeah, so like all the fucking inauguration, the parades, and all that shit.
Yeah. Capitol Police will receive $3.2 million for overtime. This is overtime to support the national political conventions. Republicans in Milwaukee and Democrats in Chicago over the summer and to prepare for the inauguration in January. So in other words, anyone who's thinking of going to protest at the DNC better watch yourselves.
Unless you got 302 million of resources to throw at that shit. You know.
Right. Stupid! You're so stupid!
Inauguration Day is in the next fiscal year, which begins in October, but expenses associated with preparing for it could be incurred this year. The bill would allocate nearly $3.7 million for salaries and expenses associated with the inauguration. Jesus Christ, all this money.
I know, dude.
Like the bill would provide $16.6 million for Capitol grounds, House and Senate offices, and the Capitol power plant. All right. The measure includes a provision that would claw back unspent funds from members' representational allowances, the accounts that reimburse senators and representatives for official expenses. Unspent funds from those accounts would be used to pay down the national debt. The measure includes a longstanding policy freezing members' pay. Okay, so we're going to get more into the kind of the cream of this.
Okay.
The state foreign operations. Congress plans to allocate just over $58.3 billion for the Department of State, U.S. Agency for International Development, and other related programs, including refugee emergency assistance and diplomatic activities. Republican lawmakers are tuning an overall cut to the bill, down from last year's $59.7 billion total. The bill includes $11.8 billion for the U.S. State Department and USAID, and $10.3 billion for international development, including a loan to the IMF to provide economic relief for some of the world's poorest nations. The bill allocated $10 billion for global health initiatives that focus on combating HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, as well as providing vaccination programs for children. Of that health funding, Democrats cheered that the bill protects long-standing funding is highlighted by Murray's Office for Family Planning and Reproductive Health Services in poor nations around the globe, for which nearly $554 million is allocated, remaining at the same level as the current spending level. Gee, you would think that, especially with what's happening around the world, that would actually be more. But no, they kept that the same. Funding appropriated to the president for multilateral assistance to international organizations programs ranging from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to programs for victims of torture is set to drop to $436.9 million from last year's funding of $508.6 million. That reduction in part reflects current political tension over the Israeli-Hamas war. Absent from the bill are funds to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, a primary humanitarian organization in the Palestinian Gaza Strip and West Bank territories. Many Western nations cut UNRWA funding after Israel accused 13 of its employees of taking part in the October 7th attacks, and many more for sympathizing with Hamas and other militant groups. The agency received $75 million from the U.S. in fiscal year 2023.
So 13 people are being claimed, and that's enough to take away $75 million.
Yes.
What the fuck? Like, I mean, we know that that's not, this is just on the accusation of Israel.
Yeah.
Like, on top of that. So, you know, okay. I know I'm not allowed to say as much as I want to say on this on YouTube, so I'll keep my mouth shut. Yeah, exactly.
Another notable absence from the bill is funding for the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, which received $17.5 million from the U.S. in last year's funding bill. Republicans celebrated the elimination of funding for the agency's inquiry into human rights abuses in Palestinian territories, which the UN Human Rights Council opened after a flare-up of violence in May 2021. The inquiry began to collect evidence of war crimes committed by all sides shortly after Hamas attacked southern Israel on October 7th, killing some 1,200 and taking roughly 240 hostages. I mean, you're not going to say anything about allegedly. You're not going to say anything about the Palestinian lives that are being killed right now.
No, or the ones that were collected or what, you know, again, it's
right.
Yeah.
The bill
and I guarantee you it wasn't just Republicans to do that either.
Oh no, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that in a second.
Yeah.
This is kind of where I have an issue with this article because they definitely have somewhat of a bias here, but we're going to break that bias in a minute. The bill would meet the annual U.S. $3.3 billion commitment to Israel this year. That's their funding that they get anyway, along with the $8.9 billion in security assistance to foreign governments. So weapons. So they made sure that Israel got that, as I said earlier. So let's continue with more of the fun. Let's get more into UNRWA for a second. So this is let me check the name of this senator here. This is Chris Van Holden. He's senator from Maryland, and he explained, you know, like, because obviously there's some issues with UNRWA right now. So I'm not sure how long ago this was, but this is from Al Jazeera, where he explains what the funding for UNRWA is for. So if you want to play that.
Looks like you got a sunburn from sitting under a lamp.
I don't think many Americans really know what UNRWA is. So the UNRWA operation in Gaza is headed by a guy called Scott Anderson. He is a U.S. Army veteran. There is no collaboration between UNRWA and Hamas. This is a myth generated by Netanyahu and others, whose goal since at least 2017 has been to get rid of UNRWA, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, Jordan, and other countries. They don't like the fact that UNRWA exists. It is an organization that helps Palestinian refugees who were displaced since 1948. And the world has an obligation to address this issue.
All right. So you explain what UNRWA is, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you would think he would not vote for this bill.
I don't think many.
Right?
Yep.
So let's get into the actual fuck shit in terms of how people voted.
Mm-hmm.
So this is from So Informed, which I pulled from Instagram.
Yep.
Congress has passed a spending bill which effectively defunds UNRWA, the largest humanitarian organization in Palestine, until next March. So you can see here who supported and opposed the bill. So you know,
a lot more Democrats in the Senate than Republicans. Looks like were for this.
Well, keep in mind this is part of the whole spending bill. Like this was not a standalone bill.
And a lot more
never are.
And a lot more Democrats than Republicans in the House voted for this too. So okay.
So but let's get into some names. Come on. So these are just, and we're not going to go for the list, but
I'm sure there's some standouts
here.
Yeah.
So Van Holden, the one who just talked about UNRWA, voted for this.
Fetterman, Klobuchar, Manchin, Schumer.
Yep.
Sinema. Booker. Brown.
Lindsey Graham. You know, the usual cast of characters.
What's Chantel Brown doing? Fucking okay.
Oh, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Warren.
Senators.
I was looking for.
She voted for this.
Yeah. Cinema. Where she's in it. Any others that are important?
Manchin, of course.
Tom Cotton.
You know, Ossoff.
Yeah.
Warnock voted for this bill. You know, MLK is rolling in his grave right now.
Yeah.
He's presiding over his church.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so these are the senators. These are people in the House who also who voted. So
okay, Clyburn.
Yeah.
Beyonce. I'm sorry, Boyamasi. Looking for important ones. Hayes. Fitzpatrick, Ferguson, Escobar. I didn't see any others that were really important. Did you?
Next slide. No. Not yet, anyway. Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries.
Napolitano.
Pelosi, of course.
Yeah.
Mark Pocan, former chair of the Progressives.
Kim.
Yeah.
Jeffries. See Jeffries up there.
Yeah.
Kuster. I think that's it.
The last bit.
Cool.
You know, Vichy Torres, of course.
Of course. All the Torreses.
Yeah. Washington Salts, of course. You know, all this, you know, but basically it shows almost every single person in Congress voted for this bill. Well,
yeah, almost.
So
there's definitely some missing. I didn't see any of the squad. There's definitely some
missing, and we're going to get to the missing ones.
Yeah.
So the only congressional Democrats who voted against the spending bill. So these are familiar, much more familiar. So basically the squad
counting Sanders as independent. That's funny.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Frost.
including Frost.
Yeah.
Kana, Dryapal, like, so yeah. So basically the squad, mostly.
All the ones who need to be opposition.
Right.
So
no surprises. But also, this is not a surprise.
Yeah.
Our buddies at AIPAC tweeted this out in relation to this. Today, the House passed nearly $4 billion in vital funding for Israel's security. This life-saving support will help keep our allies safe and ensure Israel has the resources to protect families. Importantly, the legislation provides the full $3.3 billion in U.S. security assistance to Israel, as agreed to in the 2016 Memorandum of Understanding. This essential funding with no added political conditions.
Oh, yeah.
Which highly against, but is urgently needed by Israel as it battle Hamas and other Iranian terrorist proxies on its borders. The legislation includes these additional key provisions. $500 million in missile defense cooperation, including for Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow.
Yeah.
$87.5 million in U.S.-Israel counter-drone and anti-tunneling cooperation. This represents a $15 million increase, 60%, for counter-drone cooperation to $40 million.
Yeah.
A one-year ban on past, present, and future U.S. contributions to UNRWA. We appreciate the efforts of many members who voted to include key pro-Israel provisions in the bill. In particular, we thank the leadership of the people that you see there.
Yeah, Schumer, Jeffries. Yeah, Coons, and Graham. Yeah, and keep in mind, we also talked about R&D for the State Department in this bill, right? Quite a big increase, right? Mm-hmm. That means drone swarms, Neuralink stuff, brain chip stuff, like, you know, all the fun future weapon tech that we're afraid of is going to be funded. So,
right.
Yeah.
And funded very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Abdallah Bani Sadine tweeted, the astonishing thing is that AIPAC is bragging about grabbing the U.S. by the balls. No pushback at all. Amazing.
Yep.
So this is a little bit more. So our friends at Common Dreams, shout out to Jake Johnson. Not going to read the whole article. If you want to read the thing in full, again, you know where to find it. Where he reports just 23 House Dems oppose bill that borrows UNRWA funding while giving billions to Israel. Our elected officials are funding its Palestinian death, said one advocacy group. If passed and signed into law by President Joe Biden, which it did, the measure would bar the U.S. from resuming funding for UNRWA to at least March of next year. The Biden administration and other Western governments suspended donations to UNRWA in January after Israel accused a dozen of the agency's 13,000 Gaza employees of taking part in the October 7th Hamas-led attack, allegations that has not substantiated. While Canada, Finland, and other countries have since resumed funding for UNRWA, the U.S. has kept its contributions frozen as famine spreads rapidly in Gaza. The territory's entire population is facing high levels of acute food insecurity, including according to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification. By including such a provision in must-pass government funding legislation, Congress is further deepening U.S. complicity in Israel's starvation of Palestinian children, said Josh Rubner, an adjunct lecturer at Georgetown University and the former policy director of the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. While barring U.S. funding for the primary humanitarian health relief agency in Gaza, the measure includes $3.8 billion in military support for Israel, whose forces have used U.S.-made weaponry to commit atrocities against civilians in the Palestinian enclave. So another tweet from Stephen Schmeiler. The House just passed a bill that cements genocide as official U.S. policy. The legislation gives Israel $3.8 billion in weapons, sanctions UNRWA as Palestinians starve, and funds a UN investigation into Israel's violations of international law. All but 22 Democrats voted.
Yep.
So, and if not now, also tweeted, the House just voted 286 to 134 to pass a spending package that bans funding to UNRWA, the primary organization providing humanitarian aid to Gazans on the brink of famine. The bill also gives $3.8 billion in funding to Israel. Our elected leaders are funding Palestinian death. It's unsurprising that the GOP is working to ban funding for UNRWA, while the Israeli military massacres and starves Palestinians in Gaza with U.S. financial and diplomatic backing. It's unconscionable that so many Democrats are joining them. Instead of banning funding for UNRWA, the U.S. should restore its aid to Gaza and halt weapons transfers to the Israeli military. No more money for massacre.
Mm-hmm.
And to conclude, by So Informed, the United States government is complicit in the intentional forced starvation of the people in Gaza. Every death is in their names.
Yep.
Final thoughts.
I think that pretty much summed it up for me. You know, like lot of spending going around. That, you know, follow the money.
Well, way too much for defense.
Yeah.
And not much for anything else as far as keeping the government running.
Stuff for, you know, more border patrol, more Capitol Police, more FBI, more CIA, more defense spending, State Department,
right?
More Israel support. Anything I'm missing? Ukraine support. We forgot that. That's also in there.
Yeah. Oh, we got some money for the kids. Though. We got a little bit of money for the kids. Just a little bit of money for the kids.
Just like a little bit.
Just a little bit of money for the kids.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit for the kids.
A little bit for the fucking kids. What a fucking shit show. Oh, God.
Your government loves you, children.
Speaking of money for the kids, since YouTube hates us, you can donate to us this way at ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. You can scan the QR code on your screen now. If you're in the live chat, you can put !donate. You know, get that link, get you a super chat in here. While I go check Rockfin and Rumble, which I will leave in the chats as well. But if you can't give monetarily, remember to like and subscribe. Hit the share button. You know, comment. Let us know what you think. It's very easy. You know, we're trying to get to 2K. We're getting there.